How many people are in HR? Show of hands, please. Thank you. What is an employee worth? Close. Very close. And when I say what is an employee worth, I don't mean compensation. I mean value. It's hard to put a number on that. It's a concept that a lot of people have difficulty with. And for years, people have asked me, well, why should we hire you to do this? We can hire a president, a CEO, a VP, a director, whatever. And the difference is, can you hear me from the back? This is going to die. Can you hear me from the back?
Take this one, please. It's okay. David?
I'll trade.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The difference is between hiring an okay employee and a fantastic employee. But it's always been hard to articulate. It's almost impossible to demonstrate until very recently, the last 3 or 4 years. People know who Yahoo is, the company Yahoo? Some. Google? Okay, so everybody knows Google. Yahoo came before Google. That should tell you something. About 4 years ago, two CEOs were hired by 2 completely different companies in America. Yahoo, who is a search engine like Google, and JCPenney, which was my favorite American retailer. Great stuff. Love the people, love the product. They both had great backgrounds. Marissa Mayer came in as Google vice president for 10 years. Ron Johnson was the senior VP of marketing at Apple. These are phenomenal companies to learn at, right? Yes. But we're here today to talk about people and fit and engagement and all the soft stuff that makes us uncomfortable. And I'm going to make you really uncomfortable shortly, so I apologize in advance. The results were extremely different. Within 6 months of joining Yahoo, Yahoo's valuation rose 17 billion, with a B, billion dollars. That's a lot of money. Unfortunately, my favorite retailer didn't do as well. Within a year of Ron having joined JCPenney, sales went down 4.3 billion. That's $500,000 an hour. Every hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That's how fast sales dropped. Marissa, on the other hand, value went up $3.8 million an hour. Pretty interesting. So the difference between hiring a great CEO or a great employee with the right fit and the CEO with the wrong fit, because they were both very talented and they both did extremely well before they joined the other companies, the value and the difference was $21.3 billion. So that's the difference between hiring great people and hiring okay people. Well, there's another thing that happens. Not only, HR is the toughest business. HR, in my opinion, is the toughest role in a company because you're responsible for hiring the best and the brightest. You don't get to manage them, right? You don't get to tell them what to do, but you're responsible for bringing them in the door. Well, the difference between hiring a great and not hiring a great person is obvious, but sometimes it's just as bad to not hire a really great person or to turn away a great person. Now, this guy here, Brian Acton, I don't know how many of you people know Brian, but he was the VP of engineering at Yahoo before Marissa Mayer, and he decided to leave. So he interviewed at Twitter, and Twitter turned him down. And then he interviewed at Facebook, and Facebook said, no, thank you. So he tweeted about it, and one of his friends at Yahoo happened to see his tweet. And he said, you know what, we should form a company together. So they did. And 5 years later, they sold WhatsApp for $19 billion. So it's as bad to not recognize a great person as it is to hire the wrong person. Now, in Romania, you guys are special, and you know that. And we've really enjoyed our stay here, but you have a big advantage on everybody else in the world, quite frankly, because you already know what a perfect 10 looks like. I was in Montreal, exactly. I was in Montreal, as was my business partner, Anita Martel. I was in Montreal, that's where we lived, when Nania Comaneci blew the minds of the world and got a perfect 10, and then did it again. So it's easy in sports to understand what a perfect 10 looks like because we can see it. I mean, either they execute it or they don't execute it, right? It's not so easy in the business world. In the business world, we can see that top 20%, but we can't see what's below the surface. When you're interviewing a candidate, candidates come dressed to impress. They're there to get the job. That's it. That's their job. They got to be on. They have to be on for an hour and give their best performance ever. But all you're going to see is that little part that's above the water. Now, you've got a tool here now from great people inside that's going to allow you to see a lot of the other pieces that you need to see. Because the cost of making a bad hire, according to Brad Smith, Dr. Smith, if you hire an executive and he makes about $250,000 a year, these are American and Canadian numbers, making a mistake can cost you $6.7 million to make a mistake. So what you really need to do is you need to get below the traditional interview stage and find out more about the candidate than you just see on the surface. If they look great, if they dress to impress, if they know all the buzzwords, that's wonderful. But that's not enough. That's not enough for you. So here's our agenda this morning. And I'm going to apologize, as I said, for making you feel uncomfortable a little bit, but I'm going to walk you through it. How many people have ever learned to ride a bike? Okay. Do you remember the first time you had to ride a bike? I don't know about you, but my dad stuck me on the bike, and he held me, and as I went along probably 10 or 15 feet, I was absolutely terrified. Anybody relate to that? Thank you for being so honest. And then what did he do? He said, "Oh, you're okay, son. You're on your own." So he got me on the bike, and he gave me a bit of a push, and I made it, I don't know, probably 7 feet, and then wham, and down I went. But I got back up, and I did it again. Because you really can't get that hurt when you fall off a bike. I want you to remember that today. Because some of the things I'm going to suggest you consider doing are going to make you feel uncomfortable, and just as uncomfortable as the first time you rode a bike. But you didn't get hurt too badly on the bike, right? No. And you won't get hurt at all following these steps. So I gave a talk at a TEDx. Are people familiar with TED Talks? So I gave a TED Talk 3 weeks ago, and I did it full of an auditorium full of grade 11s. I didn't know they were going to be grade 11s until I showed up. They forgot to tell me that. So I did it without any slides because I didn't know who the audience was. But I came prepared because I've got 4 adult children. So the last thing I told these young students, because I gave them 3 pieces of advice, and the last thing I told these young students before I was finished, because I closed out the talk, was my piece of advice number 3 was, be careful who you take advice from. It's important. Everyone has an opinion. So I need to grab your attention for the next 38 minutes, and I threw this up on the slide as a vain attempt to try to convince you to give me those 38 minutes of your time, because I know time is precious and you've all got things to do. So there are 5 reasons you should listen to me. The only one that counts is the 5th one. I personally have done 1,089 searches, and I've been wrong 5 times. I can now count it on one hand, 5 times. That is a phenomenal, so I'm told, record. But the reason is not that I'm lucky, it's that I have a 1-year warranty. So how many people have used recruiters in the past? Do you use recruiters in Romania? What's the normal warranty period? In Canada and America, it's 30, maybe 60 days. And if they do it wrong, they're going to do it again, right? Well, since we opened in 1988, our warranty's been a year. And everybody told me back then I was insane. What I had to figure out how to do was do it well enough so that I would never have to do it again. So what I'm going to show you today works at all levels, because I've worked with project managers. Actually, I've hired cashiers for retail stores. I'm that old and I go that far back. The last 10 years has just been executives all over the world. But the point is, all the stuff I'm going to show you today works at every single level. Every single level. And all of these magazines and newspapers will testify, well, if you read some of the articles, you'll see that I actually am the real deal. So here we go. The expression is ready, aim, fire, right? So this morning, the expression is ready, aim, hire. Are you with me? Ready, aim, hire. You with me? Okay. Yoda. So, how many people in HR, when they're given an assignment, go off and have to pretty much do it themselves? Or do you have a team? Do you have a team of people that help you? What normally happens as a recruiter is you'll go in, you'll meet an employer, they'll tell you exactly what they're looking for, and then you'll go out with a lot of energy and you'll interview all kinds of people and you'll bring back a couple of people and they'll interview them and they'll go, oh, that's not what I'm looking for. Maybe you didn't understand me correctly. So the first thing I did about 20 years ago is I started to ask the employers, I need somebody from your team. And now, at the executive level, it's always somebody from the board. Doesn't have to be, but now it is. I need someone off your team because your person off your team, they know the inside workings of the company. I don't. So why do I want to spend the next 2 or 3 months out looking for your ideal candidate and not know really until I get back and you interviewed a couple of them that I was completely wrong? Well, I'd rather not. So I don't do that. So I go and get I always ask for a search chair, and we appoint a search chair. So somebody has to actually work with me. And typically when you want to get a search chair, you want to go get somebody off the board who's invested in making the search successful. And why I emphasize successful is because not everybody on a board necessarily wants the same thing. I don't know if you've ever had conflicting agendas when you've gone out recruiting, but it happens all the time at the executive level. So you need someone who is going to take all the arrows, for lack of a better term, so that you can actually do your job. You need someone who, when push comes to shove, can say, no, this is why we did this. Here's the rationale. And it's not you selling to the hiring manager, it's someone on their boards that they trust going, no, here's the rationale, and here's how, this is why we have to do this. So never go out, never leave home without it. Never leave home without a chair. How many people do SWOT analysis? Show of hands. That's really good because it's unusual. A SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. SWOT analysis happens every single day in your company in engineering, probably in sales, probably in marketing. I would challenge you to do a SWOT analysis with your search chair or your team or the people that are hiring on every single position you hire. You know why? Because if you don't know what your strengths are compared to your competitors or someone else that's hiring, and it doesn't matter whether it's at the executive level or not, you have to know what's going to attract somebody to your company. Because hiring good people is not hard. It's not. Keeping good people is hard. And you start to keep people by thinking through the questions like this, where, is it your technology? Is it your culture? And everybody's got a culture. Whether you've created it or not, you have a culture. And people will say, oh, I want to go work at Apple because, and they can list off all the reasons. Or I'm not going to work at, pick a company, because they have friends that have told them and they know the stories. So you have a culture no matter what. So when you ask the questions ahead of time about your product, about your culture, about your technology, about where you're going, and then you start to look at your competitors, their product, their technology, where they're going, you understand where you are in the marketplace, and it makes it a lot easier to answer questions with candidates as to why you should work here. Because you know, but they don't. And oftentimes you can't, on the spot, express it. And not everybody is enthusiastic about working at your company as you are. In fact, outsiders are oftentimes looking at you, and I'm sure you've experienced this in interviews, because an interview is you're selling the company, the organization, the opportunity, and you're getting them to tell you why they're wonderful. Probably not here. People are coming to you and telling you why they're wonderful and why they should work for your company, right? That doesn't happen in Canada and North America anymore. Now, as Andrew said, and someone else said a little while ago, most employees aren't really employees. They understand that they're self-employed, and they go from gig to gig to gig. When I got out of school, a long time ago, I knew that I was going to work for one company for the rest of my, I didn't know it was going to be my own, one company for the rest of your life, rest of my life. And most people that graduated in the early 80s understood they're going to work for one particular company and that was it. That doesn't happen anymore. My children, I have 4 adult children. I told my kids, you're going to have 10 different jobs between the age of 20 and the age of 30. That's just the way it is now, and it's perfectly acceptable. It wasn't 10 years ago.
20
Thank you. Perfect. So, how many people want ordinary employees? Show of hands. How many people want superstars? Huh, good. That's the right answer, by the way, for the rest of you who didn't vote. Everybody wants the high-performance person. Well, how can you guarantee that you find a high-performance person? Remember the search chair we talked about? What about before you actually go out and do the interviews and start talking to people, you understand clearly what somebody looks like? And the easiest way to understand clearly what somebody looks like is to see them. So go out and do a benchmark interview. I mean, we benchmark in engineering, we benchmark in sales, we benchmark in marketing. Why don't we benchmark in HR? Well, you can. So you in the search chair interview somebody, and then after the interview, the candidate goes away, and you rip them apart. You rip apart their background, you rip apart their experience, you take a look at what your documents say and how this person compares, so that when the recruiter goes out, you've made the adjustments and they already know exactly what this person looks like. Does that make sense? That will save you just a ton of time. Remember, ready, aim? This is aim. Before we start a search, we probably spend about 2 days putting together 8 sets of documentation. The only stuff we're going to talk about this morning are the position profile and the confidential candidate brief. This is really different. How many people have written job ads in the past? For the newspaper or a job board? Most people have, and most job ads are, 100 words, maybe 500 words, maybe a little bit longer. Ours are a little bit more detailed. The people that we go after, the people that we look to recruit, they're not looking for us. They already have a job. They have a fantastic job. So the question that they're asking themselves is, well, why should I talk to you? And that's a question I have to be able to answer. And I don't do it verbally. When we do the research about who our competitors are, we'll talk about that in a second, who the competitors are and how we stack up, we put it together in a document, and it's usually about 5 to 7 pages. And it can actually include video. We had to include a video in the one for Bellion in the top right-hand corner because they've invented a vodka, which is good for you. Believe me, it actually is true. But people don't believe. So we actually had to produce reports. We had to make live links inside the document. And the founder is quite young. He's in his early 30s. So to get people that were in their 50s, because that's who we were targeting as CFOs, we had to have them connect somehow with the founder. We had to make them at least believe we were telling the truth before we could even get them in for an interview. So we stuck a video in the document. You click the picture, click the link, and away you go, and you're listening to the founder. So these documents that we put together go into great detail to tell a potential candidate who's not looking for a job, who we've called out of the blue, here's what's in it for you, the WIFM. All we have to do is get their attention for a couple of minutes. I don't know about you, but I got a lot of friends who just hate interviewing. And the only thing they hate interviewing more is putting together a resume. We know for a fact that most people would rather have their wisdom teeth pulled or a root canal than do a resume. And so when you're recruiting, oftentimes people will say, well, I don't have a resume. And the recruiter will say, okay, fine, you've got to make one, and they'll hang up. And if a guy calls them back, they'll do an interview. 90% of all searches for employees at the executive level stop at the first phone call because the person says, either I don't have an interview, I don't have a resume, or I'm not looking for a job. So that's like 90% of everybody you want to talk to already says no. So what do you want to do? You want to get the best of the top 10%? No, you want all of them. So what you say is, that's great. I'm going to send you this position profile that we just saw. And when you've got 5 minutes of free time, you sit down and read it. And if you like what you see, then we're going to have a conversation. Well, I don't have a resume. That's fine. I didn't ask you for one. So the next time we have this conversation, and they remind me that they don't have a resume, I said, that's fine. I'm going to send you this document. It's called a position profile. And the reason there are arrows there is because the position profile is a Word document that has questions in it, 25, 28 questions. And those 25, 28 questions, all they have to do is type in their answer. And they create a resume that's exactly designed for the role that we're looking to recruit. It's like an interview without actually having to get out of your chair. This is a very powerful document, and I would encourage you to consider using this. Now, we're still aiming, okay? Ready? Aim, 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 a little bit more. Candidates. In the world I live in, most recruiters will use LinkedIn to see who's available. They'll run an ad in a newspaper or on a job board. And when you run an ad, you typically get the best of the unemployed, sometimes the best of the unqualified, and oftentimes the best of the unhappy. And that's not who we want to hire. The odds of your perfect executive, your perfect 10 existing right now, looking for a job, when you run your ad, are 0 and nothing. Doesn't happen. So what we like to do instead is we'll go out and do the research. We'll go out and do the research. And when I'm looking for a candidate, I want to know who your competitors are, who their suppliers are, who your clients are, who your association people are, because we will go and do the research to find out who the best people are at every one of those organizations. And has anybody here play poker? Show of hands. Okay, anybody played Texas Hold'em? This is a great example. In Texas Hold'em, you got 52 cards, right? You deal with the cards, and you look at them, and you go, I don't like those 3, and you throw those 3 back in. That's a lot like recruiting, okay? You throw them back in, and you try again. You do some more recruiting, and you try again, and get a better hand, a better hand, a better hand. The problem is there's only 52 cards in that deck. Very limited. What we play instead is we have this abundance mentality. What we like to think is everybody is available all the time. We just have to make the right introduction. We have to ask the right question. Does this make sense? So we use the confidential candidate brief and the position profile to interest people everywhere. And unless they're a client, I can't steal from a client, of course. Sorry, reallocate from a client. But that abundance mentality, instead of giving me a deck of 52 cards, gives me a playing field of tens to thousands. And now my problem is, okay, so if everybody's available, how do I get that one best woman or that one best guy? Better problem to have, and it's easy to solve. These are the only 5 reasons executives are going to leave a job they have to take another one. You'll notice that money is not there. Money doesn't matter. Everything being equal, because everybody's got to get paid, money doesn't matter. Because all companies have money to spend. And so if you're trying to attract senior people and all you've got is money, you're going to spend your way into bankruptcy. You're better off to make sure you understand your culture, what you have to, value you have to offer, and look for someone whose values, their own values, connect with either the company itself or the founder. That's not that hard to do. You can do that in a simple interview. Okay, we're going to do a little bit more aiming, but we're almost finished. ABCs of recruiting. So I call this a blind call. I don't do face-to-face interviews. I never talk to someone for the first time face-to-face. Why? Because it's too hard to get to my office. Really, seriously, it is. It takes too much of my time. I will call someone, have a conversation on the phone. I am not affected by whether their suit is $1,000 or whether they're in jeans. You can't impress me. You can't possibly impress me with your physical presence. I only want to know what you've done and how you think. So the first interview we have, and they don't even know it's an interview, frankly, the first interview we have is over the phone, and I only ever ask one question. And it's really simple. I say, can you roll me back to when you're getting out of college or university, if you wouldn't mind, and as much time as you want, and as much detail as you want, can you take me through your career up to today? And what they talk about is what's important to them. And if it lines up with what you're looking for, then you've got a winner. Here's the interesting thing. I'm only looking for one thing in that first call. I want to understand whether the individual, male or female, has a strong internal locus of control, so they take charge of things and do things for themselves, or if they have a strong external locus of control. Have they been a victim? Have they had a lot of bad luck in life? Because if they've had a lot of bad luck in life, they're going to have a lot of bad luck with you, and you don't want that. If I like what I've heard, and sometimes these are 5, 6, 10-minute calls, sometimes a lot longer. Then I'll send them the position profile we talked about, tell them to sit down, take a look at it, call me back if you're interested. Believe me, I will call them back, because it very rarely ever happens. And then I will send them the CCV, the confidential candidate brief, ask them to complete it. And then we do another interview on the phone. So I put a partner on the phone with me. You should never interview alone. You will miss stuff all the time. So 2 of us will get on the phone, and I'll ask the same question. Take me back to once you're getting out of college and university, and take me through your life. I'm looking for 2 things. Consistency. I already know they're qualified, right? I already know they're qualified because we did the research, and we sent them this stuff. So it's not like it's blind. I already know they're qualified and they have the experience. Now, what is it about them that would allow me to attract them to our organization? And they're going to reveal that in that conversation. And my partner and I will talk afterwards about what it was. So if they get through this interview, we know they're interested and they're qualified, and we have a fairly good idea what we have to do as an organization to bring them on board. Okay, hire. How many people do multiple interviews? So how many people hire someone on the first interview? No hands, good. No hands. So we do 5 interviews. Sounds like a lot. It's not. If you're going to hire an executive that's going to possibly create $24 billion worth of value for your company, or cost you $6.7 million, it's worth spending a little bit of time to get to know them. But you don't want to spend a lot of time. You want to make it as efficient as possible. So when you use the confidential candidate brief and the position profile, you screen in all the people that are qualified and you're interested in. Are you with me? And then we take the top, usually 10 people, and we do a face-to-face interview. And we always do this in pairs. I'll ask a question, or Mark will ask a question, or Anita will ask a question, and somebody else will take the notes. And we do this over and over and over again. And it's always 2 people in every single interview. In second, it's going to be the search chair. It's always 2 people, one asking the question, one taking the answer, one reading the body language. Obviously not as well as you do, Dan, but close. And only if they impress us do they go forward. And if we like them, we'll take the 10 down to the top 7. And sometimes even lower than that. And then we'll do a search chair interview. So remember the person that we hired to help us? They did the benchmark interview. They told us what the person looked like, so we know what they look like, so it's their fault if we're wrong. I'm kidding. It's never their fault. They'll come for the next interview, and we'll work with them to go through the 5, 6, 7 candidates and bring it down to the top 3. Then they get to meet the hiring manager. Now, the hiring manager in our world is the person that's actually going to manage that individual. It might be the CEO, it might be a VP, it might be a director. And the hiring manager is a little bit different from the ultimate hiring manager, which we won't talk about, but you may hear me in conversation afterwards talking about the ultimate hiring manager, and that's the person that can say no to anybody for anything. So this is the hiring manager. So the hiring manager does their interview, and we're looking for different things. Every single stage we're looking for different things, and we're either including people because they've got them, or we're excluding people because they haven't. And remember, they're volunteering this information because they're not looking for a job. They're not looking to impress us. They're looking to connect with a better opportunity, which is what we're offering them. So we deselect as we go through, but the hiring manager is looking for leadership style, systems thinking, creative thinking, personal mastery. So all the soft stuff that we talked about earlier this morning. And if they make it, then they go to the search committee. Now, we've reversed this on purpose. What happens in most organizations is the search committee will interview the top 2 or 3 candidates, and then they'll take them to the boss, and they'll go, well, what do you think? And then they'll wait for him to make a decision. Oh, that's what we were going to do too. That would have been our decision. So when we do the interview with the hiring manager does not tell the search committee what they're thinking. So the search committee actually has to show up, do the interview, and think for themselves. It makes people a little bit uncomfortable, but what it really does is it drives the truth. Because if the team, if the 5 or 6 people that are on that search selection committee, if the team is actually in sync, then they have to agree. And they have to tell the hiring manager why. And here's the last thing we do with all candidates. And I'll tell you why in a second. Has anybody ever hired someone and then somebody else showed up for the job? Like you thought they were a superstar? Oh, okay, I'm sorry to hear that. But we've all had those experiences. You know, you hired Susie Rocket Star, and her sister showed up, and she just wasn't up to the game. This happens a lot because people don't actually test. Have any of you ever watched American Idol? Do you know what American Idol is? Show of hands. I can't see the heads because the lights are too bright. Thank you. So, everybody know who Randy Brown is? Or Randy Jackson? Okay, so he's one of the judges. So, on American Idol, you can't just walk up on the stage and say, oh, just put me through. I'm a great singer. And Randy go, okay, dog. Yeah, you can go through. No, they make you sing, right? They make you prove that you're good at what you do.
David, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Adrian. So what we do is we go, okay, so we think you're the person, male or female. We think you're the person. So now we want you to come and tell us what your 30, 60, 90-day plan is. We've now probably spent 12 hours together through all these interviews. You've been asking great questions. Now prove to us you know what you're going to do. And they come and they give their presentation. And it doesn't matter what they talk about. What we're interested in knowing is, in analyzing, is how they went about getting the information to make their presentation. For example, did they do it all on their own? Or did they actually call up the VP's executive assistant or somebody else and say, hey, listen, I need the following documentation to produce my report? Those are the kinds of things we're looking for because that's the kind of style, management style, leadership style they're going to have. They may say they're an inclusive leader and they believe in teamwork, but if they don't pick up the phone and ask us for any information, we know that's not true. And they've just demonstrated that they are wrong. Now, this is important. Remember how we talked about hiring a superstar or maybe not hiring a superstar? Well, this is sort of sad. Well, it's very sad, actually. Steve Curry, NBA star. He was a Nike signed athlete. So Nike had the rights to market his shoes. Okay, are you with me? So he went to re-up with Nike. He'd been with them for 3 years, and he was almost a superstar, but not quite. So he had to re-up with Nike. So he went to the presentation with his dad. He went to the presentation. The guy who was giving the presentation got his name wrong. Didn't even pronounce it. And the name he used didn't even pronounce correctly. And on the slides was another athlete's name on top of that. So, the meeting to re-sign this guy went downhill really quickly. And I don't know if that VP of sales was just having a bad day or if they just hired a lousy VP of sales. And we'll never know because Nike's not talking. But the interesting thing is that he went on to become the MVP. And they're not hiring him, and Under Armour hiring him led to Under Armour's valuation increasing by $14 billion. That's a big mistake. That VP that did that intro never should have happened, never should have been hired. So, last, don't hire a liar. Anyone seen this movie? It's hilarious, right? But in HR, it's terrifying. How'd this guy ever get a job? He was a doctor, he's a surgeon, he was a lawyer, he was an airplane pilot. Give me a break. In the US and Canada, every year, companies lose $630 billion to internal theft and bad hires. Shouldn't happen. So when you get to the end of your journey and you're pretty much convinced you're going to hire that individual and you've done your psych assessment and you've had an emotional intelligence test administered, take all that information together and look at your candidate and say, okay, is this a clear picture of the individual that we want to hire? And that's the only way to do this. Otherwise, you may end up hiring a liar. In conclusion, you all know what it takes to build champions. We talked about Nadia Comaneci at the front end. It's exciting and invigorating for Anita and I to be here and look at where you are in the evolution of your companies, because you're right at the front end. And you're engaged. As individuals and managers, you're engaged to make this happen. So you already know what it takes to build a champion. I invite you to continue that journey and build championship companies.